Let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're diving deep into some seriously profound philosophical questions packed inside one of the most famous novels of the 20th century. We are going to unpack Albert Camus' masterpiece, The Stranger, and really look at what happens when highly abstract philosophy crashes headfirst into narrative fiction.
But before we map out exactly where we're going today, I want you to just sit with this provocative question for a second. What if the only rational response to a meaningless universe is absolute, unfiltered honesty? It hits right at the core of what Camus was trying to do here. Like, what actually happens when a person just utterly refuses to play by society's unwritten rules and totally stops lying about how they feel? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the philosophy of the absurd, then look at Meursault as the absurd hero, move into the murder and the trial, explore the incredible power of translation, and finally, finish up with embracing the absurd. Part 1. The philosophy of the absurd. Finding meaning in a meaningless universe. So here's the architect of all this, the French-Algerian philosopher Albert Camus. He basically believed that there's this massive fundamental dissonance right at the center of human life. On one hand, you've got us, humanity, with our desperate, hardwired search for meaning, order, and clarity. But on the other hand, we're faced with a universe that is completely silent, chaotic, and totally indifferent to us. That clash, that unresolvable tension, that is exactly what Camus called the absurd. Now, people constantly mix up existentialism and absurdism. Actually, scratch that. They usually just lump them together. But as you can see, there's a vital contrast. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence. Basically, you're born into a blank universe, and it's your job to create your own personal meaning. But Camus' absurdism, it goes a different route. The absurdist doesn't try to invent some false meaning just to sleep better at night. Instead, they look at the universe's total lack of purpose and they defiantly accept it. They live fully in the face of it. Zero illusions, zero false hope. Which brings us to the absurd hero. Camus laid this out beautifully in his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. You know the story. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to roll this massive boulder up a hill for all eternity, only to watch it roll right back down. Literally the ultimate meaningless task. But Camus argued that the struggle itself is enough to fill a person's heart. Sisyphus becomes a hero the exact second he realizes his fate is absurd and chooses to accept it anyway. It's a template for heroism that absolutely does not need divine purpose to validate it. Section 2. Meursault, the absurd hero. How this fiction acts as philosophy. In The Stranger, our protagonist, Meursault, is the literal embodiment of this absurd man. He systematically tears down all the comforting little illusions society expects from him. I mean, his mother dies and he doesn't perform the whole ritualized grief routine. He just notices how hot it is outside and really wants a cigarette. He tells his girlfriend Marie that love means nothing and marriage just doesn't matter. He's totally indifferent to ambition. He denies God. He simply refuses to fake it just to make everyone else comfortable. Just look at how he reacts when his boss offers him this shiny new career opportunity in Paris. Meursault just shrugs it off, saying, "One life was as good as another, and my present one suited me quite well." The big takeaway here isn't that he's lazy. It's that his lack of ambition is rooted in this radical, stripped-down honesty. He knows that moving to Paris isn't going to magically give the universe some intrinsic value, so why pretend it's some life-altering upgrade? Section 3. The murder and the trial. The climax of indifference. So all this extreme philosophical detachment, it eventually collides with the real world, violently, on a hot beach in Algiers. Meursault crosses paths with an Arab man, but pay close attention to the language Camus uses here. It's totally focused on the sun, the oppressive, blinding heat. Driven by sheer physical discomfort rather than any actual malice or premeditation, Meursault senselessly shoots the man. He's completely at the mercy of irrational external forces. It perfectly captures an absurd universe where something as random as the glare of a sun can permanently alter life. And then we get to the trial, which is frankly absurd in its own right. The lawyers barely even talk about the murder itself. Instead, the whole thing morphs into this huge indictment of Meursault's failure to conform to normal emotional expectations. I mean, the prosecutor literally condemns him to death for not crying at his mother's funeral. Society is so terrified of chaos that they'll project this cold-blooded, calculating guilt onto him just to make sense of his indifference. There's this amazing moment during the investigation where the magistrate shoves a crucifix in Meursault's face, practically begging him to repent and find God. And when Meursault just flatly says no, staying perfectly honest. The magistrate calls him Musia Antichrist. It's so telling. The magistrate needs Mirso to be a literal monster. Because if he isn't a monster, then the magistrate's own rigid, rule-bound, God-fearing universe makes absolutely no sense. Moving on to section 4, the power of translation and how it shapes the stranger. Okay, this part is incredibly fascinating. Our whole psychological read of Meursault shifts massively depending on which translation you read. Let's start with the title. In America, everybody knows it as The Stranger, but in Sandra Smith's widely praised UK translation, it's called The Outsider. The original French word is étranger, and that word does a lot of heavy lifting. It means outsider, stranger, and foreigner. And Meursault is all three. He's a stranger to himself, an outsider to society, and a French foreigner in Algeria. Just that one tweak changes how we view his alienation. And then there's the most famous opening line in maybe all of 20th century literature. Look at how 3 different translators handled it. Stuart Gilbert, back in 1946, went with "Mother died today," which, let's be honest, sounds incredibly stiff and heartless. Matthew Ward kept the French, "Maman died today." But Sandra Smith went with "My mother died today," arguing it keeps the warmth of the original French. Maman is what a child calls their mom. If you translate it coldly, you're painting Meursault as this unfeeling psychopath from the very first word. So why does all this matter? Because through a tighter, more accurate linguistic lens, we realize we aren't dealing with a cold-blooded villain. He's not evil. He's just a guy who refuses to embellish how he feels, just to put others at ease. He is emphatically not a monster. He is just painfully, almost uncomfortably, without pretense. We see this dynamic again with his fairly shady neighbor, Raymond. Raymond wants to be buddies. In the older Matthew Ward translation, Meursault's reaction is, he seemed set on it, which feels very cold and detached. But Sandra Smith translates it as, it really seemed to matter to him. You see the difference? It shows compliant compassion. Meursault doesn't really care either way, so he's perfectly willing to just go along with it because it matters to Raymond. It completely shifts how we see his character. And that brings us to section 5, embracing the absurd and the gentle indifference. Everything we've covered, the philosophy, the murder, those tiny translational shifts, it all converges at the end of his life. Meursault is sitting on death row, facing the guillotine, and the prison chaplain comes in begging him to turn to God. Meursault completely unloads on him. Staring down death, the ultimate destroyer of meaning, he finally strips away every last illusion. He realizes that whenever he let society dictate his life, he was basically living like a dead man. He drops all hope of a pardon and fully accepts that death happens to us all anyway. Which sets up this breathtaking climax. In his final moments, Meursault finds radical acceptance. He says, "I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world." No last-minute salvation. No sudden, tearful apologies. He finds absolute peace by embracing a universe that literally does not care about him. By fully accepting the absurd and stepping into that gentle indifference, he is finally, truly free. And there's one final brilliant translation detail that shows exactly what Camus was up to. The very last line of the novel in French starts with "pour que tout soit consumé." That directly mirrors Christ's final words on the cross, "so that it might be finished." Camus is an atheist, but he intentionally frames Meursault's execution in dialogue with the religion he rejects. He's treating Meursault's radical, unflinching honesty as a twisted sort of martyrdom. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with Camus' own super provocative take on his protagonist. Camus actually stated that Meursault is the only Christ that we deserve. Let that sink in for a minute based on everything we just explored. Does living a life completely devoid of illusions, absolutely refusing to lie about your feelings, make you a monster? Or does it make you the ultimate hero of the absurd? It's a huge question, and it fundamentally challenges how honestly we choose to live our own lives. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the absurdities all around you.